Hello, I'm Mike, and this is Will. We are the Tabletop Donkeys.
Hello.
And we're going to bring you a look at the new 9th edition Codex for the Space Marines today. This isn't going to be a total in-depth review. There are plenty of those on YouTube if you want to have a look, but this is just going to focus on the units you got with the Conquest collection and how this changes them, and maybe at the end we'll have a look at the new releases, so this will be a sort of addendum to our What to Buy Next video, and we might have a quick look at some of the stratagems right at the end. Before we start looking at the units, we'll go over some fundamental changes to how the army might work. The first one is that certain units are now classed as core units, and things like the captain and the lieutenant auras now only affect core units, and certain psychic powers like Might of Heroes only affect core units as well, and certain stratagems.
And that also relates to the Silver Templar special rules that we had in the White Dwarf. I think the banner and...
one of the warlord traits, and one of the stratagems as well.
Yeah, they only affect core units, so we know what that means now.
Yeah, so it's essentially a new keyword for certain units. And within the collection, actually pretty much everything is a core unit. The exceptions are all of the characters, so they can no longer buff themselves with their auras. The land speeder and the repulsor are no longer core units either. But everything else, basically the infantry units, the bikes and the dreadnought are all core units. And again, we're mostly approaching this from the context of playing them either as the Ultramarines from the magazine or as the Silver Templars. So the Ultramarines chapter tactic is entirely unchanged as well.
Yeah, a couple of the other chapters have changed, but we won't cover that except maybe in passing.
Another change is that certain weapons across the board got better. So heavy bolters are now damage 2. Flame weapons all have a 12-inch range, so that's the Aggressors and the heavy flame on the land speed if you had that. Yeah, Multi-Mod is now heavy 2 as opposed to heavy 1. And melter weapons now do d6 damage plus 2 when they're below half range as opposed to rolling 2 dice and picking the highest. Another important change, actually, which I'll say now as opposed to later, is that scouts are now an elite choice rather than a troops choice, which means that if you don't have the Silver Templars extra stuff, the Intercessors from that, you're kind of stuck with taking patrol detachments if you want to take larger forces, so you will actually need to get some more troops choices. We'll probably discuss it at the end.
Yeah, it's not quite such a problem in 9th edition because your command points aren't dependent on what detachments you take anymore, so you can take a patrol detachment. It just means if you want more than 2 elites or more than 2 fast attack or whatever, you're going to want to go up to that battalion detachment, which does mean you need extra troops.
You're kind of stuck with 2.5 troops units with only 13 intercessors.
Oh, and another change as well is, and they shall know no fear, has now changed the way that works.
Oh yes, so now what it means is you ignore penalties on combat attrition tests. Yeah. So you're always only ever running away on a 1 if you have to take one. Yeah. So no re-rolling morale tests anymore. So it might actually be a problem for Space Marines potentially. And also some abilities that some units had are now stratagems rather than equipment, but I'll point those out as we get to them. But actually heading into the units, we'll start off with the Primaris Chaplin. So this is the one with the auto bolt rifle in my case, with a sword. So his power sword now gives him +1 strength, and it's also master crafted, so it gives him 2 damage. Obviously his aura only affects core units.
That does actually fix one of the big problems we had with him, which was that he wasn't that much use in melee. I mean, I guess we are talking mostly from the point of view of fighting Death Guard, but...
I mean, he's still only really on 4s, but he's better against Death Guard. And next up we have the Captain in Gravis armour. Again, his power sword gives him +1 strength. His Boltstorm Gauntlet now does a flat damage of 2, so it's not necessarily going to be the best option all the time. And his Boltstorm Gauntlet shooting is actually AP -1. And then you've got the Captain in Cataphractii armour, which isn't its own thing anymore. He's just a Captain in Terminator armour. He'll only have a 4+ invulnerable save, but his weapons actually get a buff. So his Combi Melter now gets d6 + 2 damage within half range, and his Chain Fist now does d3 damage, does 3 damage against vehicles. So he is potentially deadlier, but slightly less durable. Finally, we have the regular Space Marine Captain, the one with the Power Maul. And his Power Maul also got an extra pip of strength, but it isn't master crafted, so it's still only 1 damage, I believe. And then we have the Primaris Lieutenants, so Calcius and the 2 Power Sword ones. They also get master crafted Power Swords, so again, +1 strength and 2 damage. That is quite a nice buff for them. And they also have Ballistic Skill 2+ instead of 3+. So the one with the bolt rifle is slightly more accurate. Again, their aura only affects core units.
They'll be slightly better in melee now, with the complaint we had about them against Death Guard mitigated now.
And you've got the Librarian. The only change for him is that his Force Sword also gives him +1 strength. So again, makes him slightly better against Death Guard, so he's winning on 4s. For Psychic Powers, Might of Heroes only works on core or character units, so you can't make a Repulsor Toughness 9. Psychic Fortress used to give you a chance to ignore mortal wounds. Now it gives the Psychic a 6-inch aura that gives everyone around him a 5+ invulnerable save, which is actually quite nice.
That's actually pretty good.
It's certainly worth taking. Fury of the Ancients are still useless, otherwise Psychic Scourge and Null Zone are all the same. And next up is the Primaris Chaplin. I think the only real difference is that his Absolver Bolt Pistol now does 2 damage instead of 1, and his aura only affects core units. Most of the litanies are similar, but they only affect core or character units, so again, you can't really buff the repulsor with them or anything. And now we're on to the troops choices. So the Intercessors are essentially entirely unchanged. The only difference is if you have a grenade launcher from the Silver Templars box, it's an assault weapon and not a grenade weapon. So the guy with it can fire it and his rifle at the same time. And that's all the troops. So we're on to the elites now. We have the Scouts. As I said, they're an elites choice, which is probably quite a big nerf because the elites choice is heavily crowded in the Space Marines. And there's nearly always going to be better options. Also, they don't get an extra wound, whereas a lot of the firstborn, as they're called, did get extra wounds, but not Scouts. And their weapons are slightly different. Their shotguns have an 18-inch range, but no longer get +1 strength within half range. And their sniper rifles have AP -1 now instead of AP 0. But I think the fact that they're elites is the biggest issue. And we have the Apothecary. Now the ability to revive is a stratagem, but when he revives a unit, it comes back on full wounds. He also gives infantry and biker units within 3 inches of him, essentially a 6+ chance to ignore wounds, so 6+, disgustingly resilient. Also his Absorber Bolt Pistol is 2 damage. I think Apothecaries, especially the upgraded version, we'll go over that later, are actually quite good in this Codex.
The chance to bring back an Aggressor or an Inceptor, say, on full wounds is, I guess...
and you don't need to roll. You can't fail to bring someone back. And then we're on to the Primaris Ancient. His banner aura affects core units. I think it was just infantry units in the past, so you can't allow characters to come back, but it doesn't mean you can let the Dreadnought come back.
I think actually the biggest change is that it's now only a unit has to be in range and not a specific model, I believe. So you can be a lot further away from your Hellblasters and still, as long as you don't kill the one who's inside the range of his aura. I guess it means you don't have to be in quite such a compact blob to use him effectively.
Spread out a bit more.
Yeah.
Next we're on to Reavers. Their pistols are now special issue bolt pistols as opposed to heavy bolt pistols, which are AP -2. Their leadership debuff is now -2 as opposed to 1. And their shot grenades are now a stratagem, which we'll explain at the end.
They did get a couple of stratagems that benefit them.
Yeah.
It seems that the changes have been to try and distinguish them from Assault Intercessors, which we'll talk about in a bit. Whether they've succeeded is perhaps up to debate.
I mean, particularly the ones you get from the collection, which don't have the grapnel launchers or the grav shoots, so they can't outflank or deep strike. And then Aggressors. So Aggressors, with the ones you get with the collection, now have a 12-inch range with their gauntlets. Gives them a bit of extra threat. And their gauntlets are only damage 2 in melee as well. But the main massive nerf they got is that they can no longer shoot twice if they stand still. I still think they're a pretty decent unit. You could argue that they were pretty overpowered if you were playing Ultramarine Success and they could shoot twice on the tactical doctrine. And then the next elite's choice is going to be the Redemptive Dreadnought, and Dreadnoughts look really good in this edition, I must say. Its stat line's the same. Its heavy onslaught Gatling cannon is now going to be strength 6, and AP -2 if you're in the Devastator doctrine. That's not a bad gun. And the heavy flamer gets an extra 4 inches of range. It's range 12. It also has a new rule called Duty Eternal, which used to be a stratagem, which is whenever an attack is allocated to it, you can subtract 1 from the damage. So against the Death Guard we got, that's actually huge, because it means that Power Fists only do 1. The Foul Blightspawn can't delete it in one go. Next up we have the Bikes. The only real difference is they get an extra wound. So it's a little bit tougher, but again, it's all the limitations of the kit you get rather than the unit itself being bad.
Yeah, I mean, they've still only got that twin bolt gun.
But the Attack Bike is actually a bit of a winner because it only costs 2 power, but both of its weapon options are buffed. So it's got a damage 2 heavy bolter or the multi-melter. And we're on to the Inceptors. The ones from the collection are entirely unchanged. So the assault bolters don't get damage 2, even though they're essentially heavy bolters. The plasma version did get a slight buff because they now have blast weapons, but they no longer have their ability where they charge a unit and cause mortal wounds. That's now a stratagem. Since flying units can no longer fall back and still shoot, they can do that if they're Ultramarines, just at -1 to hit. And next up we have the Land Speeder. So now there's technically 3 flavours of Land Speeder. So you've got the regular one, which is the heavy bolter and multi-melter, the Land Speeder Tornado, which has the heavy flamer or the assault cannon, and the Typhoon, which has the missile launchers. And they cost different amounts of power. They also are toughness 6. There's the weapon changes, but it isn't a core unit either. So it doesn't benefit from the captain's reroll or the lieutenant's reroll, unfortunately.
I'd say the biggest change to the Land Speeder is actually the division into the 3 different kinds, because it just means that if you want to take a less well-equipped one, you're not going to be paying 6 power for it, and it also means that you don't feel obliged to take the missile launchers and multi-melter simply because...
Yeah, if you just want a really fast multi-melter, you could just take the rest standard Land Speeder. It's only 3 power. We're on to Hellblasters, into the heavy support section. The alternate weapons both got buffed, but obviously you don't get that with the ones with the magazine. Actually, one important change, they only blow up on unmodified hit rolls of 1. So you can overcharge at units with Miasma Pestilence and not be blowing up a third of the time. And the Repulsor, which is a heavy support choice now as opposed to a transport option. It's not a core unit either. Of its weapons, heavy onslaught Gatling cannon +1 strength. The onslaught Gatling cannon in the turret now is heavy 8 as opposed to heavy 6, but still only strength 5. Heavy stubbers are are heavy 4, not heavy 3. Also the Icarus weapons, so the heavy stub with the rocket pod, no longer have a penalty for shooting at units on the ground. Instead they get +1 to hit against aircraft, so now there's a distinction between flying units and aircraft. It also gains a Hunter Slayer missile, which also used to be a stratagem, 48 inch range, heavy 1, strength 10, AP minus 2 d6 damage. You can only fire it once per game, but you can shoot it at things that aren't visible to the tank. Also its repulsor field rule it used to have is now a stratagem. It also no longer has the fly keyword, it does limit its mobility, it can't just jump to the other side of buildings now.
I think the biggest change is it's not a core unit because it just reduces its firepower basically because you can't stand a captain and lieutenant next to it to improve it, which with the number of guns on it does make a difference.
I think that's it for all the units from the magazine. So now we're going to move on to some of the new releases that we didn't cover in our What to Buy Next video. So first up is actually a Primaris Captain. It's the one from Indomitus, or you can get him in the Command Edition or the Elite Edition start set. So he's a Primaris Captain with the Power Sword, and he gets the Relic Shield, which gives him +1 to his save, and a 4+ invulnerable save, and also it gives him a chance to ignore mortal wounds on a 4+. So I think he's a really good option for the Armour of Zonaris from the Silver Templar supplement. He'll have a 2+ save against most things, or a 4+ invulnerable save against anything bigger. So he's actually a fairly tanky option.
I guess there'd be a discussion as to if you were taking a melee Primaris Space Marine army, which is now a viable thing, whether he's better or the Gravis Captain's better. I'd say the Gravis Captain probably has a higher damage output. This guy might be a little bit more resilient, even though he's not toughness 5.
Yeah, and then it was also the Captain with a Mastercrafted Heavy Bolt Rifle, who is essentially the Gravis Captain, where he swaps the Boltstorm Gauntlet for the Mastercrafted Heavy Bolt Rifle, which is a 36-inch range, rapid fire 1, strength 5, AP minus 1, 2 damage. Like if you wanted a Gravis Captain to stand in the back lines, you take him.
If you wanted to sacrifice a bit of the Gravis Captain's melee capability for a bit of firepower, which to be fair, the Gravis Captain does have 2 melee weapons, which basically means that one of them is redundant. So, I mean, he's still going to be good in melee. The question is, I think, if you were running a more of a gunline Space Marine army, whether you'd actually want to pay the extra to have him, or just have a normal captain who still has a reasonably good gun, or indeed, say, a Phobos captain who has quite a very good gun.
And I suppose there's an alternate option for the Primaris Lieutenant. Again, you can get him in the Recruit Edition, where he has a Storm Shield and a Neo Volkite pistol. I mean, the Storm Shield certainly helps because it gives him a 2+ save or a 4+ invulnerable save, because Lieutenants weren't particularly durable. I mean, the Shield one also has a Mastercrafted Power Sword, so he's better than any of the ones you got from the magazine because he's more durable.
Once again, I think it comes down to what kind of army you're fielding and whether you actually want him to be a good melee combatant or not.
There's the Primaris Tech Marine. Probably his main reason you take him is that he can repair vehicles. He also has an ability where you can pick a friendly vehicle unit within 3 inches of him, and he gives them +1 to hit. So basically you could park him behind your repulsor.
I think the thing is now that the repulsors aren't all core units, stand him next to it instead and you can repair it and give it +1 to hit.
There's essentially upgraded versions of what are called Masters of the Chapter, so it's an upgraded version of each of the characters. Basically, you can upgrade a character for more points or more power, and it gives them some extra abilities. So the Chapter Master is the upgraded captain. You can pick a core or character unit within 6 inches of him until your next command phase whenever they attack. They can reroll hits, and each one of these gets access to a relic and a warlord trait. That's unique to that. And also, there's a limitation for these in Crusade, where you need to spend a requisition to upgrade a character into them. You can't start with them.
All of this used to be in Psychic Awakening, Faith and Fury, but they used to be stratagems, and now they've made them into upgrades instead.
Yeah.
I think the relics and the warlord traits are all quite similar to what was in there.
I mean, the ones I would say of these that are most worth it for the collection are the Chapter Master upgrade, the Chief Apothecary upgrade. Actually, it's really good. It lets him use his healing ability twice. It also makes the stratagem to revive a unit free as opposed to 1 command point. And there's also, the Chapter Ancient, the Chief Librarian. And next up, we're back to the troops. We have the Assault Intercessors, who are Intercessors, same stat line, but they have heavy bolt pistols, and they have Astartes chainswords, which are AP-1. You can see them in our open play video they showed up. You can get some from the Recruit Edition.
Yeah, you can get them in all of the starter sets, I think.
Yeah.
And there is a multi-part plastic kit on the way.
I believe in the full kit, the Sergeant can have a Thunder Hammer, a Power Fist, or a Power Sword. Well, it's nice to have an actual melee unit as troops, as an alternative to Intercessors.
And if you watched our Conquest series, we did mention several times that the collection and indeed the Primaris Space Marines up till this point just haven't really had that many decent melee options, so it's nice to have one again. So they would definitely be a good addition to the Conquest collection, I'd say.
I also think they work really well with the Claim Runes stratagem from the Silver Templar supplement. For 1 command point, you can give them an extra point of strength and an extra AP on their weapons. And they work really well with duelists as well because they get tons of attacks. And next up is Heavy Intercessors. They're Intercessors in gravis armor. So they're all toughness 5 and they all have 3 wounds. Basically the same deal as regular Intercessors. You get 3 flavours of bolt rifle. There's a heavy one, a rapid fire one, and an assault one. One man can take one of 3 flavours of heavy bolter. They're all strength 5. The heavy ones have longer range and AP -2. Rapid fire ones are AP -1. And the assault ones are the shortest range and AP 0. It's like they're going to be really good for holding objectives.
Yeah, they are actually quite a good anti-death guard, but I guess also anti-elite unit. They're going to be good against anything that's got a decent armor save and decent toughness. I don't think they're available to order yet, but I also suspect they will probably end up costing about as much as 10 Intercessors for 5 of those.
Yeah, £35 for 5, whereas normally
I'm expecting
£35 for 10 Intercessors.
Yeah, I'm expecting that's the price point we're going to be looking at. So in our What to Buy video, I think we already did recommend possibly getting some more Intercessors, particularly if you get some more Assault Intercessors as well, then you might be alright for troops choices.
Well, next up in the Codex is the Blade Guard Ancient. Is essentially the Ancient again. He has the same Astartes banner ability as the regular Ancient. But he has a slight buff to Blade Guard units, which we'll get onto a sec. He gives friendly Blade Guard units within 6 inches of him an extra +1 to hit. And unfortunately, you can't get him separately yet. He was only part of Indomitus.
I'm sure you could convert one if you wanted to. The Blade Guard themselves will be available soon, and I'm sure you could find a banner from somewhere and convert one if you really wanted one. If you don't have Blade Guard veterans, take the other banner man because he's slightly cheaper.
Yeah, and the Blade Guard themselves, they're an elite melee choice, so they all have Master Crafted Power Sword, so +1 strength, 2 damage. They all have Storm Shields. They also have 3 wounds for some reason, even though they're only regular guys and not in gravis armor. And they are a core unit, so you can buff them with lieutenants and captains. And these are only part of Indomitus at the moment. There is a plastic kit coming out. A really solid, pretty durable choice, and they're really good looking models as well.
Again, they're finally a Primaris melee unit that actually can go toe-to-toe in melee, which is something that the Space Marine collection from Conquest has lacked. Basically, a melee unit that can take a charge and hold it from a powerful melee unit, pretty much.
And just we have veteran intercessors. These are elite intercessors, so they get an extra attack each and extra point of leadership. Other than that, they are entirely the same. They can also be given Astartes chainswords and heavy bolt pistols instead of rifles, so you can have veteran assault intercessors. I guess they don't really stand out too much compared to the other elite choices in the Codex, so not compared to Blade Guard.
They're another elite choice in a crowded elite section, but on the other hand, you just need to buy some intercessors, or indeed paint some of your existing intercessors if you've got the Conquest collection as veterans.
Yeah, and if they have Astartes chainswords, they have 5 attacks on the charge, which is quite good.
Although, not being troops, they're not going to have the objective secured rules, so that is one disadvantage of them compared to normal intercessors.
Next up in the elites is the Judicia. So this is the chaplain with a really big sword. So he's not technically a chaplain. He doesn't do litanies or anything. It's a pretty good melee combatant. And also at the start of the fight phase, you can choose an enemy unit within 3 inches. That unit can't fight until the end of the fight phase after all eligible units. So he's a pretty cool model, but again, I think he's only available in Indomitus at the moment. Going through, we're on to Fast Attack. We have the Outrider Squad. It's essentially the Primaris biker unit. Compared to the bikes you get with the magazine, these are a flat upgrade. They have an extra wound, an extra attack each. They have Astartes chainsaws by default. They also get +2 attacks when they charge, so you get something ridiculous like 6 attacks when they charge. Yeah, if you were looking to replace the bikes from the collection, this is the good one. And you can get these in the Elite or the Command Edition starter set at the moment. Next up we have the Invader ATV. It's basically the Primaris attack bike. It has 8 wounds. It can either have a multi-melter or an onslaught Gatling cannon. They have twin auto bolt rifles, which are assault 6.
It's also basically twice the cost of an attack bike.
Yeah, you can get 2 attack bikes with multi-melters for the same price as an Invader with I think it's 5 points more for 2 attack bikes. Also, Invaders aren't core units for some reason. Technically, you can't buff them, whereas attack bikes you can. But they are a biker unit, so you can technically bring one of these back to life with an Apothecary if you have them in a squad. And next up we have the Storm Speeder, the 3 flavours of Storm Speeder, the Hail Strike, the Thunder Strike and the Hammer Strike. Essentially they're the Primaris Land Speeder. Pretty much similar stat line. They have 10 wounds, but they do degrade. The Hail Strike is the anti-infantry option. Thunder Strike is the long-range anti-tank version. And the Hammer Strike is the short-range option. It has a 3-shot multi-melter essentially.
I think with all 3 of them, you could probably get more firepower for your points with other units, but on the other hand, they are pretty cool looking, so... Does it add much to the collection? I guess at the time we were getting the Conquest magazine, the Primaris Space Marines did have a lack of anti-tank options. That's not really the case now, so these aren't necessary to improve that.
I guess if you wanted to replace the Land Speeder with a Primaris unit, the Hammer Strike is probably the nearest comparison. Maybe you could go for the Thunder Strike instead if you want. And the Hail Strike doesn't look too impressive. With the collection, I think you're fine for anti-infantry firepower. Really, you're just going to choose the one you want. I wouldn't say any of them are particularly bad or particularly good.
If you see the kit next to some other ones, it's a huge vehicle, so I suspect it's going to be in the region of 45 to 50
Yeah, it's
pounds.
probably going to be fairly expensive, actually, yeah.
Certainly compared to a standard land speeder.
Yeah, so it might be the case where it's just an alright unit, but again, it's just an expensive option. Next up on the new releases is the Eradicators. So they're armed with melter rifles, or they can have heavy melter rifles. Both versions are 24-inch range, either assault one or heavy one. The main thing about these is the fact that they can shoot twice as long as they shoot at the same target. And they can do that even if they move. And they're also core units, so you can buff them with characters. And they're gravis units, so they're toughness 5 and 3 wounds. Yeah, and they can take a multi-melter, which can also shoot twice, so that's 4 shots from your multi-melter. If you're Dark Angels and you stand still, they hit on 2s. With Silver Templars, you get to reroll a miss.
And in terms of points to field, they're not even that expensive.
Yes, they actually cost the same amount as Aggressors.
But they can shoot twice.
They also cost the same amount as Inceptors with Assault Bolters as well, and the same power cost as well. I mean, I complained a lot about not having anti-tank firepower, but this is almost like, well, you've gone too far now. I mean, they'd still be good against low numbers of elite infantry as well.
Pretty much, unless your opponent's bringing a horde of cheap infantry, these are going to be worth getting.
Always worth getting.
They were only available in Indomitus, but they are getting a multi-part plastic kit.
Which will help the multi-melter.
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, if you have the Conquest collection, then when these come out as their plastic kit, or if you were lucky enough to get a copy of Indomitus...
they're really good.
Yeah.
And if you're playing against Space Marines, shoot at them. Next up is the Firestrike Servo Turret. It's a gun turret with a Tech Marine on the back. Either has a twin Las Talon or a twin Accelerator Autocannon. Heavy 6, Strength 7, AP-1, 2 damage. It has a ballistic skill 2+, because it's a Tech Marine. Well, it's going to basically spend the entire game in your deployment zone. It's probably not going to move very much. It has a movement of 3. Technically, it can advance. It could move 9 inches.
You could stick it on an objective, I suppose.
And it's a vehicle, so it can shoot at things it's been charged by with its guns. I still wouldn't say it's amazing. I think it's £23.50, so it's reasonably cheap. Next up, new releases, there's the Gladiator tank, so you get the standard 3 flavours that seems to come with every Primaris unit. The Lancer has the a Lancer Laser Destroyer, gets +1 to hit, so it hits on 2s with that weapon. The Reaper has twin heavy onslaught Gatling cannons, and the Valiant has 2 multi-melters and a twin Las Talon. So again, you've got the long-range anti-tank, anti-infantry and short-range anti-tank. Again, it's a case of pick the one you want. Probably the Valiant or the Lancer would go well with the collection. And I imagine this is also might be fairly expensive if the Impulsor is £45, and this is essentially an Impulsor with a turret on the back. Just looking at the pictures of the models, it looks like it might be fairly easy to magnetise. So you just get one and have all 3. Yeah, and then the final new release is actually a Fortification, which the Space Marines didn't actually have in their Codex until now. And it's got a ballistic skill 4+, it can't move because it's a building. It either has a heavy bolter array or a flamer array, and its gimmick is that it fires its array at every enemy it can see. It has a missile launcher as well, which is a reason it's all right. A lot of the background suggests that it should be able to be deployed from the sky, but it can't, so it has to set up in your deployment zone. If the enemy opponent gets into melee with it, it can't shoot out of melee, and this can't fall back because of the building. So it's stuck firing a single heavy bolter or a flamer at whatever's attacking it. Depending on how much terrain you use, it might just be really easy to avoid as well. I think this costs about as much as a Redemptive Dreadnought, which begs the question, why wouldn't you get a Redemptive Dreadnought? I mean, I'd get a servo turret over this if you really wanted a static defense.
Like all fortifications, for me, it just seems to fit best within something like narrative or open play, where you have a mission where you're defending a defense line or something. Or
it could be a fun narrative tool, but that's it for all the new releases. Stuff worth looking at. Certainly Assault Intercessors and Blade Guard go really well with Silver Templars, Eradicators, Gladiator and the Storm Speeder, I guess. If you're looking to upgrade the collection, not necessarily a priority. Land Speeder's already alright. Land Speeder's got some buffs anyway.
Perhaps overall, the main thing the new releases add is melee capability for the Primaris, which we've moaned about with the Primaris mains previously. So I think it does actually solve that problem fine.
Yeah, again, it's basically all just filling in things that the Primaris didn't have. But yeah, that's it for all the new releases. So I guess we'll have a quick look at stratagems. We're only going to focus on the stratagems that again affect units from the collection. So Death to the Traitors now lets you re-roll hit rolls against Heretic Astartes. And there's Honor the Chapter, used to affect every unit, I think, but now only Assault Intercessors. Transhuman Physiology, I believe, is completely unchanged. It only works on Primaris, so you can't use it on bikes. So there's a Rapid Fire Stratagem, and now all of those sort of unique stratagems for each flavour of Intercessor are gone. Now Rapid Fire lets you pick an Intercessor squad, or Veteran Intercessor squad at the end of the shooting phase, and they get to shoot again. So that does apply to units with Stalker Bolt Rifles. Gene Wrought Might is exactly the same. There's a new stratagem called Unyielding in the Face of the Foe, which you play on a gravis unit when they get chosen as a target of an attack. They get an extra +1 to their saving throws against attacks with damage value of 1. Perhaps not necessarily so useful against the Death Guard.
Yeah, you're pretty resistant to the 1 damage stuff anyway.
Yeah. Only in Death Does Duty Ends is exactly the same. Hour of Contempt is the same. We have Power of the Machine Spirit, which would affect the Repulsor. For 2 command points, you count it as being at its top damage bracket, regardless of how many wounds it has left. It pretty well actually worth using on the Repulsor because it has so many guns. Wisdom of the Ancients now lets you choose between the Captain Aura or the Lieutenant Aura, so either re-rolling ones to hit or re-rolling ones to wound, for core units within 6 inches of the Dreadnought. Obviously, Dreadnoughts are a core unit, so you can actually buff themselves with that. And we have Commanding Oratory, and the Chaplain can recite a litany that hasn't already been recited by one this turn, so it just automatically takes effect. It doesn't say it has to be one the Chaplain actually knows, so I guess you could just choose any one of them. And we have Combat Revival. This is the what allows apothecaries to bring infantry or bikers back. It returns with 4 wounds. If you're the Master Apothecary, it's free. Then we have Relic of the Chapter and Hero of the Chapter. These are, you can give out extra relics or extra warlord traits, and the number of times you can use them is actually based on the size of the game. There's one here called Hit and Run Warfare, which you can use on a biker, landspeeder or stormspeeder unit that lets the unit fall back and shoot. There's Hammer of Wrath, which you play on a jump pack unit, so that would be the Inceptors technically. It's essentially the same as the Inceptors old rule, but now you roll against the target's toughness, and if you roll equal or more, cause mortal wounds instead of just on a 6. We have Skilled Riders. You can give a biker, landspeeder or stormspeeder unit, if they advance, they get -1 to hit, which is definitely a lot worse than it used to be. It gave you an 4+ invulnerable save if you moved. There's one called Uncompromising Fire, which for 2 command points allows an infantry unit to shoot while performing action. So that's some objectives in games, particularly Crusade games, seem to like actions a lot. Usually when doing action, a unit can't do anything except fight in melee. So I don't know, there are some cases where you might want to do that. State Advance, the unit counts as stationary, even if they move. Adaptive Strategy is if your Warlord is on the battlefield, you can choose a core unit. All doctrines are active for that unit. So it's essentially -1 AP on all their weapons and any benefits you get for your chapter being in specific. And next up, Terror Troops. For 2 command points, you can choose a Reaver unit. It effectively allows them to remove objectives secured from enemy units within 3 inches of them. You can potentially contest objectives using that. The other option for Terror Troops is that if a Reaver unit ends within 3 inches of an enemy unit performing action, you roll 2d6, and if you exceed the enemy unit's leadership, the action fails. There's also Guerrilla Tactics, which would apply to the Reavers. They can be placed into strategic reserves if the mission you're using allows them to do that. So it essentially allows them to redeploy from one of the board edges. Orbital Bombardment is different. You choose a point, and then on your next command phase, you roll a dice for each unit within 6 inches of that marker. If you're up against a really slow army, I guess maybe Death Guard might fail to get out of the way. If there's a gap, the enemy's all surging through you, play that. So I don't think it's particularly useful.
You might be able to force them off an objective as well.
Yeah. An Auspex Scan. Now you don't get the -1 to hit. Then we have Shock and Awe. This is essentially the shock grenades. You choose an enemy unit, and then that unit can't fire Overwatch or set to defend if they're in terrain until your next turn. And they also get -1 to hit to all their attack rolls, so melee and shooting. I wouldn't say it's a particularly bad stratagem. Again, the Reavers you get with the magazine are the foot slogging versions, so they're sort of lacking in mobility. Yeah, next up is a Grav Pulse. There's 2 options. You either get the Repulsor field effect on a unit with the Repulsor field keyword, or if you play it in your movement phase, the unit can fall back and shoot.
So that's quite useful for the Repulsor actually, because tying it up is harder.
Yeah, if you're not playing Ultramarines especially. It's Hellfire Shells. If you shoot it at a monster unit, it does 3 damage instead of D3. Flak Missiles now can only be shot at aircraft, but do 2d3 mortal wounds instead of 1d3. And then there's Smoke Screen. It's like the Rhino's smoke launchers. You play it in your opponent's shooting phase when the unit is a target of an attack. So you don't have to give up your shooting phase to do it. Not too bad, especially with the Repulsor. I mean, you might actually use it. The problem with the auto launchers on the Repulsor is that it gave up its entire turn of shooting, and it has so many guns, you basically have to use it to get much value out of it. And Scouts also have the Smoke Screen rule, so you potentially make them more durable. So that's it for stratagems. All the Warlord traits are basically unchanged. I think Stormfire is back to being how it used to be, so you roll a 6 to wound and get -1 AP. It also only affects core units. The Fear-Made Manifest Aura now makes the opponent subtract 1 from attrition tests as well as 1 from leadership, so they run away on 2s. Again, you really need to stack those to get the most benefit. And Rites of War, now it gives core and character units within 6 inches of your Warlord objective secured. And otherwise, the others are all the same. Most of the relics are the same. The Armor Indomitus gives you +1 wound in addition to its effects. And there's stuff for secondary objectives, and there's loads of stuff through Crusade, which I won't get into all of it, but there's some nice flavourable stuff in here I'll just mention, like the Honorifics, which is a new battle runners. In a Space Marine chapter, there are 10 captains. Each captain has a specific title, and you can give a captain one of those titles. Mostly, either makes certain stratagems cheaper, gives you more command points, or makes certain requisitions free. Sure, sharp. We'll do more Crusade, and some of those will come up.
Yeah.
I mean, basically, you are going to need this Codex. It's certainly I think overall it's a very powerful Codex, certainly at the moment, before everyone else has theirs.
Probably wouldn't change the status quo as much as the previous Space Marine Codex.
Yeah.
Purely from a Conquest point of view.
Oh, I will say, I do like the layout of the new Codex. All the points at the back. It just lists a unit and then lists the points for all the possible options they can have. Instead of just having a big table of things, and you have to find the things, and you need to look back at the unit to figure out what it can take. And also, all of the rules that affect units are at the front. So it's all the rules, then the psychic powers and stratagems and stuff are at the front, and the detachment abilities, and then all the data sheets and all the points. It's a lot easier and much more sensibly laid out. But yeah, I think that'll be it to wrap it up.
We will obviously be playing more games with Space Marines soon, which will show off these new rules.
Yes, we do hope to do some Crusade with the Silver Templars and versus the Necrons, considering they also have a new Codex. So yeah, if you have any comments, if you think we've missed anything, or you have any opinions on some of the new releases especially, leave us some comments. We've been the Tabletop Donkeys, and we'll see you in the next one.
Bye for now.